You said something very interesting, and I heard you say this before on the weekend, that you can taste the wine that you're going to make from those grapes. And what is it that gives you that that feel or that inclination?
It's the soils, of course, because I've been tasting wines, for the last 40 years of my, almost 40 years. I'm not trying to give away my age, but maybe it's been 35 years. I don't know. I started tasting at a young age. And so I was curious, curious about soils and in my experience at the University of Bordeaux and that diploma. We're at a show. We're at a wine show.
We can edit that. Just if they stop dropping, we'll be good.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So,
yes.
So I was very curious about soils and the university, and then writing the AVA and all of that, that I just knew I had the imagination and the experience to I guess taste it without even making it.
Right.
And we're adding Syrah this year, and so I can taste that.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I know what it's going to taste like. And there's Viognier on the property that I really want, but it's only 1.2 acres, so it's tiny. And one person has claimed it all. It's a 94 acres, so we have there are 36 producers that are purchasing fruit from this vineyard. It's one of the most popular vineyards in the state of California.
Site. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can taste the Viognier as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that tells me something, not only about your passion, but your skill, like combining those two things together, that you're able to even do that. Okay, so Oceano.
Yeah.
I am familiar with your 2018 Chardonnay. I've had that before, and then I had the chance to try the 19 and the 21. And I will say this, like Oceano always seems to have, like I can tell its characteristics. It has like a sense of place.
Great.
Right? How would you best describe your Chardonnays?
Our Chardonnay is really a reflection of the proximity to the ocean and the soils, and it's an ancient seabed. So it's marine shale, limestone, sandstone. You have the fog that comes over and sits on the vineyard, and you have all that salt bound up in the fog sitting on the grapes. And then, of course, you have the root systems that are pulling up all of the minerals from that ancient seabed. Yeah. So it's this saline, briny style character, which is what I like in food.
I was just about to say, which makes it so wonderful with food. Yeah, I find your wines. And then there's the fruit profile changes vintage over vintage, so it's clearly like you can see this vintage variation, but that linear salinity that it's always there. It's a great backbone in those wines.
Yeah, it's a hallmark of the brand. And I'd like to say, in a way, it's a hallmark of the region. So it's an AVA called San Luis Obispo Coast that was established last year. It's about 14 months old. It goes from Big Sur down to Santa Maria. It's a 60-mile stretch, 15 miles wide, and the vineyards are planted between the Pacific and the western slopes of the Santa Lucia Mountains.
That's perfect.
So you have like the northern and central part of the AVA, which includes the Edna Valley and the Arroyo Grande Valley. It's more deep clay, or on the hilltops, like rocky to deep clay to clay alluvial soils. And then in the western part, where Spanish Springs is you have that ancient seabed. So there are two distinct soil types in the region, but it is the coolest climate for grape growing in the state. Yeah. And it's one of the world's longest growing seasons. So you have a lot of like complexity and flavor development with lower sugars, so lower alcohols, but without sacrificing complexity of flavor.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, so you now have at Oceano 6 vintages under your belt in terms of dealing with the grapes. I'll talk about 2020 in a second.
Okay.
But I'd love to know from your perspective how you've seen the wines transform or grow over this period of time. Any differences that you've
I knew that when I started, I didn't want to make something that was already out there in the market. But we were learning the clones and learning how the clones react to their terroir. So we started out with Clone 4, 17, and 809. And Clone 4 is a classic California clone. And we also, the first vintage, I didn't want to do any malolactic. Marbu convinced me. He's like, how will you ever know that not doing mallow is the way if you've never done mallow on these grapes?
Right.
I'm like, fine. Maybe you know something more than I do. I accept. So 15% mallow was the first vintage, 2016. And the wine's gorgeous, but I was like, no, not the style that I want. So he agreed. And so then in 2017, we limited the Clone Forks. We're like, it's a little heavy, it's a little viscous, not my style. And so we reduced the percentage and increased 17 and 809. And then in no mallow, and we were aging for 11 months in French oak. And at that time, because it's a new project, I mean, it's not all new oak, trust me, but we are buying from reputable sources used oak. So we're doing that, and we're figuring out our oak program, and we're figuring out the yeast that we think develop the flavors best that we're looking for. And then in 2018, we removed Clone 4 completely and went for Clone 96, 17, and 809. Still no malolactic. And then we reduced the amount of aging in barrel to 9 months instead of 11 months. And maybe kicked out a couple barrels. We added puncheon. So we added larger format barrel to ferment and age in. And then in 2019, it's the same clone combination, but you have winemaking, wine style choices, but you also have the weather, you know, the vintage variation for like. Was there more rain? Was it cooler? What were the temperatures at harvest? Were we rushed to pick? What curve of ripeness are we picking on the different clones that we've chosen? So we and then you have people, so you're like, okay, I want to pick on this day. You're making these decisions. Well, it's a 94-acre vineyard. You have to fit in with the other producers. It's just reality. So there's a little variety, but the 2019, I think, is the most unique of all of the vintages of Chardonnay.
I agree.
And I'm crazy about it. It's not classic. It's very much like very Chablis, almost like could be a champagne.
Yeah, there's something very special about that 19. I think a lot of us, when we tasted it, said the same thing. There's something about that.
It's alluring. In this way that you're like, is there a spirit inside?
In this glass. It's true.
Yeah, I love that vintage. And it's a little bit on the pushing on the earlier ripening side. And it's pushing I'm not trying to be popular, I'm just trying to do something that
I'm trying to express myself.
I want to do something with meaning. And then in 2021 we did a little riper. We're trying to get like the balance and so there's a little more melon in the vintage 21 of Chardonnay, which I think is just gorgeous, like a honeydew melon. It's a really beautiful. So we're looking, maybe it has more complexity to it than the 19 does. We only bottled it about this time last year, so it still has a lot of opportunity to show its complexity. But there are wines to age. We're making. That's why we close and natural cork closures.
Right.
And then, we're using tin. There's no plastic in our capsules. And we've gone lighter and lighter and lighter glass bottles,
Yeah. As I told you, I'm going to let my 18s sit for a little bit and just watch how they transform as time goes on. Okay, so we are obviously at a show, folks, hence the background music.
Yeah.
But I want to just ask you one thing before we end today. What do you want people to take away from their Oceano Wines experience? When they're tasting these wines, what's the one thing you want them to take away or understand?
I want them to take away that these are coastal wines and they're unique expressions of traditional varieties. So this, what do I know? But it's the future of California style wine. Excuse me for saying that. It's like all these California producers here. There's
but I think you're right, though. I think you're right. Yeah.
And I'm not just a wine producer. I'm a consumer too, and I want to make wines that excite me. And so I want people to take away that there's tradition aside, there's a new style, there's a new kid in town, so to speak. And California wine is not Rumbauer. California wine is not Cougar Juice. California wine isn't just high in alcohol.
No.
Depending on the climate and where it's grown, you can be making wines that are just as cool and just as groovy as any other region in the world.
Yeah, and I think you've shown us that. Rachel, thank you very much.
Thanks,
it was wonderful
Beverly.
chatting with you. I can actually sit here and just talk.
I know.
We're lounging on these chairs. I can just lounge.
Yeah, so hopefully some of you will be coming to the show today. It's not just a trade show, it's a consumer show too, and it's called Eureka, and it's at Beanfield Center. And it's what brought me to Toronto, but I had the opportunity to do 2 really cool events leading up to it.
Yeah.
So awesome. That's how I got to meet Beverly, and I'm so happy that we met.
Me too. It's been awesome. Thank you again. Peace.
Bye.